Welcome to Invest Out West podcast. I'm Nat Micken.
And I'm Kahlia Micken. We are a husband and wife team who live and invest in Western Queensland.
Join us on our journey of creating passive income through mindset, business, crypto, and property investing. Welcome to episode number 9 of the Invest Out West podcast.
Today we want to lead with a quote that Albert Einstein said that goes, "I have no special talent, I am only passionately curious."
Yeah, so today we wanted to talk a little bit about the benefits of cash flow rental properties in inland Queensland in our case. This topic usually opens a fairly big bag of worms because the usual fors and against between capital growth and cash flow. Now in Australia, the focus on rental properties is very much capital growth and a lot less so cash flow. That is different for different parts of the world, but what I've found is that in Australia, when you start to talk about cash flow properties, the so-called property gurus start to roll their eyes and say, no, cash flow's no good, it's only capital growth that you need to focus on. And I have questioned that line of thought a fair bit since I've got into the property investment game, and what I've come to understand is that people who only invest in capital cities and high populated areas along the coast and them sort of places, I've come to realise that capital growth is the only game to play, really, because cash flow, you can't buy a property for the required price to make cash flow gains anything significant. And that's what I have come to realise, is that a lot of people who say that only capital growth is the only way to go, those people don't know what can be possible once you leave the coast and the capital cities. So I started to think a bit about this again recently. Now to be clear, we focus on cash flow properties. We don't focus on capital growth. So when we buy a property, we buy it for the cash flow returns, because we can see what we're going to get. So we look at the property, we say, okay, this is going to be the purchase price, this will be the closing costs, this is going to be your ongoing costs like your insurance and your rates, them sorts of things, and this is the rent that we're going to be able to get. And you can just spit out a number return on that calculation, and it can't be nothing is left to chance. That's the way we look at it. Whereas on a capital growth purchase, a capital growth focused purchase, you're sort of more reliant on the market to make you at the end. So therefore, it can't be just sort of set in stone what you're going to make. So that's why we focus on cash flow. And what I'm going to go into a bit of detail here now is the benefits that can be achieved by cash flow investments when you get away from the more populated areas. So this got me thinking recently because I've been looking to get into more more industrial and commercial type investments, and I have been looking at coastal areas just to see what can be achieved. And I saw this one property for sale on this main road in a fairly major town, and when I looked at it, I said that is actually when I thought about how many times the revenue was compared to the purchase price, it'd come back at 16 times the purchase price compared to annual return. And so that got me thinking a bit about this, looking at property as the number of times purchase price to return. And so that got me thinking about how you sell a business. Most businesses are sold on that way of working out the value of the business. And I have never sold a business, but when I looked that up on Google, I found that a small business is usually around about 1 to 2 times annual revenue is what a small business usually sells for. And it can be, if it's a high growth business, and that it can be up to sort of around that five times revenue. But working on around that sort of 1 to 2 times what you pay for a business. And that is the way I look at property investing, and I believe that that's the way you should look at property investing, is that it's a business, and it has to make money. We don't sort of just do it just for fun. It has to perform. And so when I started to dig into this idea of this multiply, like how many times revenue to purchase price, I started to look at how many times that is on our portfolio, and compare that to a major coastal city. So I took Townsville as sort of a benchmark. So Townsville is a major city in northern Queensland. It's the biggest city in the northern part of Queensland, and it's right on the coast, and it's a fairly well off sort of a place. And so I sort of went through some sort of average sort of suburbs, not the slums, but not the high end, and sort of found that you could pick up a 3-bedroom house for, say, around about $400,000 and rent it out for about $500 a week. Now, as I say, this is very much average. You can buy houses a lot cheaper than that, and you can get more rent than that, depending on the suburbs and the style of house. But take that as an average. So I got some figures here. So working on that, $500 a week on a $400,000 house comes back at $26,000 per year in rental return, which at 15.5 times 26,000, which is 26,000 is your annual return. So times that by 15.5 comes back at 403,000. So you could say roughly that is over 15 times revenue to purchase price on like a coastal sort of a house in that setting. So then I looked at what can be sort of achieved in more of an outback setting, like where we invest. So to take, say, a $120,000 house, so that's sort of like a 3-bedroom house. Admittedly, houses are getting dearer. Well, they're getting dearer everywhere, but you can still find $120,000 houses, no worries, in outback locations. And that type of a house usually would get you around about $260 per week in rent, and that comes back at $13,520 annually. Now, if you times that by 9, that comes back at $121,680. So around sort of between 8 to 9 times of your return is your purchase price. So that is, say, between 8 and 9 times from over 15 in a more populated location. So then I looked at our average. So on our 4 investment houses, which are all located in outback Queensland, so we, on average, we've paid $105,000 per house. And on average, we are getting $270 per week. And like I say, on average, that comes back at $14,040. And times that by 7.5 brings you $105,300. So pretty much right on 7.5 times our annual return is our average purchase price. So that just sort of says to me about the benefits that can be achieved through investing in the type of towns where we invest. So when I looked at how that would translate to a portfolio, I said, okay, say we bought 120. Take our first benchmark of $120,000, which is still can be easily achieved in these towns. So $120,000 house at $260 per week. So if you bought 2 of them, that comes back at $240,000 purchase price, and double the 260, which is $520 a week. So that is compare that to the coastal location of $400,000 and $500 per week. So you're only at $240,000, which is well under your $400, and you're still making slightly more in the rent. $520 compared to $500. So this is why we focus on cash flow properties. Now, that's not to say that we don't get capital growth in these towns where we invest, but what I just want to point out is we don't factor that into our revenue. That we consider that as the cream. So we have one of our houses in 2 years. When we got it evaluated after 2 years, it had doubled in price from when we first purchased it. So that tells me that so if you were to buy, say that you went and bought a $100,000 house in inland Queensland, to me, I believe that house would be easier to double in value to go to $200,000 than a $400,000 house would be to go to $800,000 to double that house. So I think the benefits of what this podcast is called, Invest Out West, I just think that the benefits of investing in these locations where we focus on, I really believe that it outweighs investing in a more populated area on the coast. I've said that right from the word go. Now, some people will vehemently disagree with me, but yeah, that's fine. You know, if your figures can disprove my figures, then that's, yeah, I have no problem with that. But all I'm pointing out here is that the figures that I'm working out that can back up my thoughts on investing in the type of locations where we invest, to me it far outweighs investing anywhere else. So that's sort of what I wanted to touch on in this podcast, and just to sort of open people's mind up at the possibilities that can be achieved when you leave the coast and capital cities. Now that these figures aren't, they're not set in stone. Like there's some towns that would have a far different ratio, like some inland towns, like mining towns, and that, for instance, that perform way less than other inland locations. But it's all about where you look, and what towns. Like some towns I look at that I've thought about investing in, and when you run the numbers, you say, no, it's out of the question. It's really no different than going and investing at a coastal location, because the numbers are sort of pretty much the same. Whereas other towns, I've mentioned before about how we invest and what we look for in a particular town. So we look for towns that have a strong future, but don't have a lot. You could say don't have as much going for it at the time. But we also look at the rental demand that can be achieved at the moment without the projected increase in the future. So that's sort of just what I wanted to touch on this podcast. Kahlia, did you want to have anything to add to that?
No, not a lot really. Just the fact that, just to reiterate everything that you've said, like how much potential there is to invest in these smaller towns. And as you say, when you do the numbers, you can really see, like, it really shows the return that's there. And I guess the other thing to look at too is that not to sort of diss small towns, so to speak, because they are smaller populations, because there is so much potential behind them, even though we are in smaller numbers out here. But, there's huge potential, and yeah, obviously we're very, very passionate about investing sort of, outside the square a bit.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's about all we got on this one, and keep living the dream.